Hi everyone, welcome back to the Mindful Living Summit. My name is Kaylee Isaacs. I'm the founder of the Awake Network, and I'll be your host for this session with Dr. Kelly McGonigal, who many of you will know from the morning practice sessions that she's been leading us through the week. Dr. McGonigal is a health psychologist and a lecturer at Stanford University, as well as a popular author of many books, including her newest book, The Joy of Movement: How Exercise Can Help Us Find Hope, Happiness, Courage, and Connection. Thank you, Kelly, for being here with us today. And also thank you for leading us through these wonderful exercises each morning.
Yeah, thank you for including me.
So on the very first day, when you led the mindfulness exercise, you talked about how we were connecting our attention with our intention by placing it on the breath. And then through movement that we were bringing that into action, and how that could represent how we could bring our mindfulness practice into action in our lives. And I'd love to just start there. How is movement a helpful bridge for bringing the stillness of mindfulness practice into movement in our lives?
Yeah, so my working definition of mindfulness actually is, it sort of has all those parts, those working parts in it, that mindfulness starts by having an intention, that there is a way you want to be in the world, or what you want to bring to the world, or what you are cultivating in yourself or in your life. And then you use this quality of paying attention to align your actions with that intention. And that quality of noticing and observing and noticing cause and effect can really allow you to further align yourself with whatever that intention is. So I really think of mindfulness, it is about how you're choosing to engage with life. And so when we bring movement into it, it's a bit of a metaphor that you're literally, you're uniting these attentional qualities of mindfulness with action and engagement with life. And so it has that sort of wonderful quality of just, this is how you do it, how you move throughout the world. But also, we know that movement has all of these specific effects on your brain in ways that can enhance the quality of our attention, or that can help us experience emotions that I think of as being really supportive of what I think most people are looking for when they start a mindfulness practice. So I think most people have the idea that mindfulness will allow them to feel more hope, more connection to other people, more courage, more acceptance. And we actually know that because of how movement just changes what's happening in your brain and body, those states are often more accessible when we move our bodies. So I think that's another wonderful reason to bring movement in. Whether you do it through, moving your arms up and down, or whether you do it through yoga, or you do it through Tai Chi, or you do it through swimming or taking a walk.
I think when people think of mindfulness practice, sometimes there's this idea that we could really quiet our mind and find a serene situation and relax and kind of finally let go of all the things that might be stressing us in our lives. And so I'm particularly interested in, as we're bringing a state of mindfulness into our daily lives, into the busyness, into the messiness, and the challenges that we might meet, how movement might help us relate with that, to have like a strong foundation in our mindfulness practice to actually meet the challenges.
So, often when we do sit still and do a mindfulness practice like breath focus or some other meditation, right, there's this idea that it might be calming, but often the direct experience is suddenly you are flooded with inner experiences that you have to find a way to navigate, to tolerate, or negotiate, whether it's thoughts or memories, emotions, feelings in your body. So often what's happening in those practices is you're learning how to meet all of that with these qualities of attention that we're trying to cultivate. And so I think of movement as basically an amplification of that. So, if you are doing a yoga practice and you're holding a stretch, there's a lot of sensation there. And how do you tolerate what might feel uncomfortable, but that it's something that is good for you, that is allowing you to change in interesting ways, which hopefully a yoga stretch is doing. Or how do you stay put when you start to feel tired or exhausted and your muscles are saying this is hard, but there's a part of you who wants to stay strong and cultivate more strength. And so I think that often movement practices, again, you could be going for a run, you could be weightlifting, you could be doing yoga, but it's a way of almost like leveling up this practice of accepting things that are going on inside of yourself and figuring out, how do I want to interpret that? Like, do I want to interpret this fatigue in my muscles as a sign that I can't do this? Do I want to, it's the same way with seated meditation. Am I going to interpret discomfort in my shoulders as a sign that I should quit? Or do we find a way to make space for that discomfort, make space for those sensations, and remember why we're here. Remember what our intention is. So that's one way that movement, I think, can help us do that. But also, I believe that movement is a really good way to experience the paradox of life, where often there are things that are aversive or unpleasant that we can't get rid of, but that actually are tied to what is meaningful and joyful and liberating and what we are choosing in that moment. So there are very few forms of movement, like we're talking about exercise, that don't come with some challenge, some discomfort, and also some things that feel really good. The freedom of moving with speed, or the satisfaction of moving with strength, or the thrill of moving with grace and beauty in a dance class. There's a lot of good that comes with, oh, and this is hard, and oh, this is fatiguing, and oh, I have to breathe more deeply to support this, and oh, there's some voice in my head that even though I said I wanted to do this, there's that voice in my head that's saying, when is this over? When do I get to leave? And again, can be very similar to what people experience in a meditation practice, but I find that our ability to train our capacity to make room for all of it and remember why we're doing it, and to put our focus on the things that support us in continuing, whether it's the pleasant sensations or the deep meaning of it, or what we love about the space that we're in or the community that we're moving with. Again, it's all things that I think parallel meditation practice, but it's a very visceral way to experience it.
Yeah, I think when we're talking about bringing our practice into the world, especially with all of the challenges that are happening in our world these days, we're going to meet obstacles. And so I like to think of it as just as you would be pushing against a weight, if you were lifting weights, and then that helps you to grow, that the obstacles can be seen as an opportunity to actually strengthen your practice. And I've heard you speak so skillfully about the connection between those two of being able to push through physical challenges and how that can actually inform your emotional or spiritual life.
Yeah,
I'd love to hear more about that.
mean, so you can directly experience that in your body. I heard so many stories from women who started doing movement forms that you could think of as like basically just doing really hard things, like power lifting heavy weights, or throwing axes and flipping tires, and doing obstacle courses where you're, like literally going through fire or being electrocuted as you run through electrified wires. I mean, like choosing to do things that you would think, why? Why do you need to lift really heavy things? Why do you need to run through fire? And what they would often report is that in doing these things, you literally sense your own strength. You witness your capacity to change and grow. I mean, you mentioned that's something that we need in life, right? To experience our capacity to transform, to change, to grow. And when you engage in movement activities, you literally witness it, because last week you couldn't do this movement, and today you can, and next week you can do it and enjoy it, or do it a little bit longer or with more power or whatever. You literally sense your capacity to grow in ways that are meaningful to you. And often in movement environments where people are doing hard things and literally sensing their own strength, often what they experience is that other people are also rallying around them and supporting them. And just like meditation communities can be really important when you're training your mind, movement communities can be really supportive when you are choosing to learn how to be that version of yourself who can choose to overcome obstacles, who can do difficult but meaningful things in order to grow or in order to pursue what is important to you.
When we're talking about the engaging with that difficulty, I'm wondering, sometimes the pressure seems to be helpful and helps you grow, and then sometimes it feels like it could be damaging. And how do you go about distinguishing that line, whether it might be physically, how hard to push yourself in a movement, or spiritually or emotionally as you're engaging with a challenge?
Yeah. I know, like, there's some people who thrive on pressure. I'm not one of them. I feel like when it comes to pressure, there are two principles that I've tried to keep in my mind so that I both don't allow myself to be pushed or push myself more than is healthy, and also don't allow myself to do the opposite, which is to retreat before I actually need to, like to come up to the very, like the first taste of that discomfort or that pressure and become paralyzed and want to retreat. And those two principles are that you are never doing it by yourself, that you don't have to do it by yourself. And so when you're feeling that pressure mounting, to ask yourself, where is support available? Who else is in this with me? Who cares about me? Who can join me in this effort? Who's been through this before? And again, this could be, any sort of life circumstance. So that having that principle allows me to sort of reinvestigate the pressure that I feel in a way that maybe can take some of the pressure off without requiring me to immediately back off of the goal. Or if it's a situation that I don't have a say in. Because there are a lot of times we're feeling the pressure, the crisis, and it's not like you actually get a timeout. Like that circumstance is not changing. You have been called to rise to this challenge. So we have to find a way. The other thing I try to keep in mind is this principle of natural time, that things don't always unfold in the time course that you want them to. And it is okay to slow down. It is okay to press pause. It is okay to feel uncertainty in this moment about how it's all going to unfold and how you're going to get through it. And that sense of being able to, like if you feel the pressure, that you could choose to try to pause, even if it's, literally just taking a breath, or letting people know that, at this point in time, I'm going to need to take a break, or I'm going to need to get some support for this, or I need to reconsider how this is, working. That when you know that you have that option, even if it's just the moment of taking the breath, sometimes that also makes it feel more possible to deal with the pressure without rushing sort of into it in a non-mindful way, or letting yourself be pushed by it in a non-mindful way. And it's never, I should say, because the question that you asked, another way I could have answered it that I very intentionally didn't answer it is, I think we have this idea that we've all seen this chart. A little bit of pressure is good for you, and it enhances your performance, and it brings meaning and excitement into life. But too much pressure and you're screwed. And you get sick and you die and you can't think straight and you're a horrible person. We've all seen that chart, right? And so I feel like people, it's as if we had the choice to find this ideal spot, as if you get to choose the stress in your life, like you get to control the universe, and I'm just going for that peak performance pressure. And I feel like a lot of times people think that's what I need to get to. I need to get to the place where I'm under just the right kind of stress and I've avoided all the bad stress. And I've not really seen a lot of evidence that we can choose a sweet spot by controlling the universe and our circumstances. So I really don't think in terms of how much stress is good and how much stress is bad, but really about as stress increases, as circumstances get more confusing or more overwhelming, how can you draw on some of these principles of mindfulness, like being able to pause, being able to not feel alone and look for, literally we've been practicing this week, sensing the space around you, opening your ears, opening your eyes. Part of that is being able to increase your ability to notice what is in your environment, which can include resources that are available to you and people who care about you. When we're practicing opening our heart to this moment, I believe that practice that we did is literally physiologically making it easier to notice when someone who cares about you wants to help you. You'll be able to read facial expressions differently. It'll feel less awkward or uncomfortable to receive the support of others or to ask for help. So I think that's part of, we don't get to choose how much pressure and stress there is. So.
On a related topic, I wanted to ask you about courage. I think it's easy to sort of stay on the sideline or not engage. It can feel safer sometimes than actually going out on a limb and speaking up or stepping into the situation or caring about a cause and doing something about it. Or even it can be easier to sort of be numb and not really feel what you're feeling, especially when it's intense emotions. And so what's the connection between feeling what we're feeling and the courage that takes on a body level, and the ability to take the leap and engage in the world?
Yeah, so I love that the root for courage, the word courage, has, probably say this wrong, how the French would say core, for the heart. And I like to think about that because I know that in the moments that require courage from me, I'm likely to be able to sense my heart. Typically, it will be pounding, like in fear, even if I feel paralyzed. It's so interesting, even when people become paralyzed by fear, often that sensation of their heart pounding, like they sense their heart is ready there to give them energy. And so I like to think of courage as being meeting a moment where your heart is pounding. It's telling you this is a moment that matters. And it's pounding in order to not just catch your attention, but to supply you with energy so that you can engage. To choose to focus your attention on what it is you want to bring to the world or who you want to be, so that that pounding heart, even if it starts out as fear or as paralysis, can be transformed into this physiological mental state of challenge or compassion. And I often like to remind people that every way you look at it physiologically, compassion and courage look a lot like a stress state, in that both of them typically they begin with heart rate accelerating. They often start with a sense of distress, that you feel activated, and often in a negative way, because you're aware that something distressing is happening. Someone is hurt, someone is scared, something is going on in the world that is causing suffering, and you want to change that. And so moments that require courage, moments that require compassion, they often start out as a very clearly distressing state in which your heart is pounding, and you have to choose what you're going to do with those difficult emotions. And so, I think about in the moment when your body and brain are like, how are we going to respond to this? And it's giving you options. And maybe the first option it gives you is that safety response that says, we're gonna actually freeze you for a moment while you figure this out. Is to bring to mind what matters most to you, or what you want to bring to the moment. And what we know from the research is that as soon as you do that, so let's say that that something is going on in my family, someone is scared or hurt, and it's triggering a lot of empathic distress in me, and I'm starting to feel overwhelmed by my own fear or my own sadness, and I'm starting to feel almost like shutting down from the intensity of that I can choose to remember who I care about is maybe the family member that's with me. And what I want to bring to this moment is a sense of the courage and compassion to be with them and to offer a presence that allows them to experience what they're experiencing and feel supported or feel safe or feel a sense of hope. And just by bringing that intention to mind, it changes all sorts of things that are going on in your brain and in your body to support that. It starts regulating your nervous system so that you are more balanced, less paralyzed, and less sort of overactivated. It changes what's happening in your brain in a way that activates your hope circuitry and your even like literally your motor system, so that if you wanted to reach out and give a hug or stand up and do something, it changes what's happening in your throat and your vocal folds, so that if you want to speak up, you can say something. And that intention changes your physiology in a way that invites in courage or compassion. So that's one of the reasons why, for this week, I offered that practice of remembering what matters most, of slowing down, of connecting to your heart and remembering what matters most, because as a practice that begins in your mind, it will literally travel to your physical heart so that you can continue to have that energy to engage.
Your newest book is about the joy of movement, and I'm wondering why movement is so joyous and how it can be an ally to us in rousing that courage.
Yeah. So, movement is joyful for so many reasons. And I think, I put sort of on a spectrum. You can get to the very nitty-gritty, what movement does to your brain chemistry. And you can also look all the way down the scale to how the movements that most people choose to do, like if you were to choose your favorite form of movement, like hiking in nature or swimming or dancing or walking or cycling, whatever it is that people often like to do, it is something that often puts them in environments and in contexts that give them access to other human joys, like being in nature, listening to music, connecting with other people, cooperating, getting better at things. So there's the brain chemistry, there's what happens when you move in the ways that we tend to move in society. it's just giving you access to all of these other things that are naturally meaningful and enjoyable. And then you get all the way to the level of deep metaphor. And I'll just give you a simple example. When I was writing this book, I explored a few worlds that I have no experience with, including ultra endurance running, where people are running like multiple marathons in a row, beyond the marathon. And they're doing these incredible physical feats that are so exhausting. They're almost unimaginable how hard they're asking their bodies to work. And what so many people who are involved in that world told me is that the greatest joy of that was when you're doing something that difficult, you absolutely can't do it by yourself. There is no way to do it without receiving help from other people. And there is also no way to get through it without being presented with an opportunity to help someone else. And what I heard from almost everyone I talked to in that world is that I started to see it as a rehearsal of human interdependence. I think about, if you were to think about the wisdom side of joy, and what are the things that we need to know are true, to hold in our mind and heart with just, utter confidence that allows us to experience deep joy, not just the moments of pleasure, the endorphin rush of movement, which is wonderful and helpful, but like the kind of inner knowing that just makes room for deep joy, knowing that we thrive together, that none of us are alone, and that we are fundamentally interdependent. And that's what human beings are. When you know that, it creates so much more room for joy through that wisdom. So even at that deep level, and I see that in so many forms of movement, there are other things that you experience in a concrete way that are really part of the wisdom tradition.
Are there other metaphors that also point towards some of these deeper lessons?
Yeah, so one that I heard quite often was from people who were living with grief or depression or trauma. They often found themselves drawn to walking or running, where they could literally sense themselves moving forward. This metaphor of one foot in front of the other and of having a sense of direction in life. And again, it can sound like almost, it seems so obvious and simple, but when you actually are living in those circumstances, it can feel like you're carrying this extremely heavy weight, and moving forward is the hardest thing in the world to do. In fact, actually, I heard from a number of people who specifically chose to train. It's a form of movement where you tie a harness to yourself and you are carrying a heavy weight forward. And this idea that even if they never got rid of, they were never able to get rid of this loss that they were carrying, this experience that they had, to sense themselves as able to move forward even before they were able to feel free from the emotions that they were carrying and the experiences that they were carrying. So that's one metaphor that I heard frequently. I also, one of the metaphors that I have heard a number of people mention is the invitation to take up space. So there are a lot of movement forms where you are a bigger version of yourself, where you literally are reaching out, whether it's in a yoga pose or whether you're doing martial arts and you're reaching and expanding into space. Whether you are, one of my favorite movement forms, a dance class, where you are invited to make your movements big and expressive, and sometimes even to vocalize, like in martial arts or in a dance class, to make a joyful noise or to make an aggressive noise. This metaphor that you have a right to take up space, that you can be big, that you can be bold, that you can express yourself. And I have heard many people talk about having lived that physical experience, that they feel that sense that they are entitled to take up space in the world, metaphorically, that they are entitled to be the big, bold version of themselves, to not hold themselves back, to not have to sort of perform to other people's ideas about who they should be and how they should be, to literally have a voice.
It makes so much sense. It brings to mind that quote that says, the way you do anything is the way you do everything. Yeah. And I actually don't know who that's by, but a sense that, the way that we move matters and can be connected to the way that we move in the world.
Yeah. I mean, I often find myself encouraging people to think about an inner quality that they want to cultivate, to bring more into the world, or something they want to experience more in the world. and to find a movement form that they think expresses that. So if they want to be just more playful in life or more creative in life, what's a movement form that to you seems playful or seems to require creativity or improvisation? If you want to be more centered and grounded, what's a movement form that you either imagine would train that, or if you were to watch someone who is really great at that and you would say like, wow, that person is grounded, that person is balanced. For me, I find that the traits that I'm often trying to cultivate is celebration as one, which is one of the reasons why I love dance, because I can so easily connect to that quality of celebration and appreciation and gratitude. And courage, which I often experience through things that are hard and that require me to use core strength, like kickboxing or certain types of core strength training. So you can figure out what it is that you want to cultivate in yourself and to find a movement form that does that. And it's almost like, so in my meditation training, my favorite types of meditation are sometimes called chitta bhavana, which is this idea that you can move the mind in the direction that you want to be. So if you want to cultivate compassion, you put compassion in your mind and you become more compassionate. Like you choose to move your mind there, and that strengthens that trait. Or if you want to choose to have more steadiness and equanimity, you do an equanimity meditation. And I feel like movement is just the embodied version of that kind of meditation practice.
Thank you. And as we come to a close of this interview, I'm wondering if there's anything you'd like to share with the folks that have been watching through the week of how they could further bring this into their lives.
Oh, yes. Well, so whenever I end a class that I'm leading or like a workshop or retreat experience, my favorite exercise to do is, I sometimes call it the snow globe exercise. So I'm going to invite people to do this on their own. But the idea is you imagine you've got everything you heard this week. You heard from a lot of people. You got to do a bunch of different practices. Some of the stuff probably seemed like it conflicted with each other. Some of it maybe it was like, I don't know if that's for me. So imagine it's all on a snow globe. You're just going to like shake it up. And some of it was just noise that really wasn't for you. People said it was for somebody else who was watching. But there was something in the summit that was for you to hear and for you to remember. So imagine you're going to like shake up that snow globe and you're going to put it down and you're going to let all the noise drop away. And you're going to ask yourself, what did I hear that I needed to hear? What did I remember that I needed to remember? And I find that you can look through notes if you have them, or just do it as a contemplation. But I find that is a wonderful practice for an experience like this, where there's a lot of learning and a lot of information. And to be honest, you don't need it all, and you don't need to take it all with you. And that in itself is a mindfulness practice of choosing to bring your attention to what it is that you believe will support you and choosing to carry that forward.
Thank you so much. What a beautiful note to end on. It's been such a pleasure to have you here. It's always nice to speak with you. And I also really enjoyed our pre-interview dance session too.
Yes, enjoy.